If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and another tutorial. Today I'm going to sew along with you the Yasmota Handbag by Country Cow Designs. This is such a fun sew. I truly loved it. I love all of Country Cow Designs patterns. They're always very unique in their construction and their look, and such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Joe, for donating the pattern to this tutorial and allowing me to make this tutorial. First off, let me show you some of the amazing features of this bag. So you can see on the front how it has decorative, well, they're not decorative, they're functional handles, but they kind of make these wonderful sleek angles and lines. We have a generous slip pocket on the front. Handles are on the back as well. Have nice and decorative things happening on our gusset for the crossbody strap. Purse feet on the bottom. Recessed zipper. And this is one of the things I did different. Joe has a wonderful construction on the inside of her bag for some amazing slip pockets, but as I keep all of my linings the same, because that is what my thing is with my clients, I did my usual zipper pocket with overlay and 2 slip pockets on the opposite side. So definitely check out Joe's lining slip pocket. It is amazing. She does a zipper overlay in it, so that's very similar to my zipper pocket as well, but she does have a really, really unique slip pocket in there that you will definitely want to check out in the pattern. Things I did differently in this one. So Joe is great. She kind of explains in her patterns the different kinds of interfacing you can use. She does use sew-in Decovil Heavy in her video, which you can definitely catch on her channel if you want to do that. I ended up using foam interfacing because I am a foam girl. So for that, I did not use the pattern pieces for the interfacing because they didn't quite work with how I did for my foam. So if you are using a Decovil Heavy, make sure you check out her tutorial to see how those pieces come in. If you're doing that, you got to make sure that you leave it outside of the seam allowances if you're using a fusible Decovil Heavy. So I used foam. You will see I did cut a piece of Decovil Heavy for in the bottom, and that is not in the pattern. That is just something I did extra to have that extra stability in the bottom, as I did my whole gusset in foam rather than Decovil Heavy. I do give you those measurements for that piece of Decovil Heavy that I do cut, and I give instructions on how I did that. My cotton pieces I backed with a medium woven interfacing, which was EBFuse Light. The rest of my linings I used a waterproof canvas from Fabricville, so I did not need to interface. This beautiful vinyl is a vinyl from Sam Fabrics Creations, a supplier up here in Canada. My black is the Loon black Canuck vinyl from Galaxy Kustoms. All of my hardware is from Emmaline bags. What else did I use in this bag? I think that's it. So yeah, I didn't do too much differently. She also has instructions on how you can put a magnetic snap, or like one of those magnetic moon snaps that go over the top here. I decided not to use the magnetic snap. I do include the magnetic snap in the introduction for all of the supplies. I decided after the fact that I didn't think that I needed it for this bag. So yeah, besides that, oh, I did one more thing different. In her instructions, she has instructions for putting piping cording in the handle. I did not have any of the right size, so I did my handles almost the same as her, just a little bit different. So I show you how to accommodate if you are not using the piping to get this beautiful, can you see this beautiful stitching all on the handles and up the handle connectors here. So I do show you how we still attain that look without using that piping cording. Anyways, again, thank you so much, Joe, and how about we get to sewing this bag? So you're going to need some number 5 zipper tape, rivets, 2 swivel clasps, 4 purse feet, 2 D-rings, a slider, 2 zipper pulls, magnetic snap optional, and a zipper, and your nameplate as well. Okay, I got my lining pocket pieces here, my lining slip pocket pieces, my exterior bottom piece, and that piece of Decovil Heavy I have cut 4.5 by 13 inches. My lining gusset piece. My slip pocket pieces for the exterior. My exterior gusset piece. my exterior main body pieces, my lining main body pieces, my lining top pieces, as well as my 4 zipper panel pieces, my 2 side accents, my lining top gusset accents, my connector pieces, 2 handle pieces, my exterior top gusset pieces, and my crossbody strap, as well as some sew-in foam. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my crossbody strap off camera. If you need a class on how to do that, it's down below in the description. Okay, so I'm doing this a little different than the pattern. So I cut a piece of Decovil Heavy 4.5 by 13 inches. I'm going to find my top and bottom alongside centers of this. I'm going to take my exterior bottom overlay. I'm going to find my top and bottom centers of that as well as my exterior gusset piece. I'm going to find my top and bottom. Well, I guess they're my long side top and bottoms centers. Now I'm going to draw a line connecting those 2 snips on all 3 or on 2 of these pieces. Okay, and then I'm going to match up that line and place this nice and centered, and you will see it'll look like it doesn't look like it fits. So I'm just going to follow the line of my gusset, kind of trace it out into those corners, leaving about a 1/2 inch seam allowance on one side, fold it in half, and then cut everything together, and you should get somewhat of the correct shape to put this on. Then I'm going to go ahead, center this on outside of the seam allowances, and give it a good press to stick in place. Okay, so that is all done. Now I'm going to take my overlay piece, and on the right side of this, I'm going to mark with my erasable tandy leather pen, my silver pen, where the purse feet placement is and make my marks. We're not going to install the purse feet just yet, but we do want to have these marks in place before we prepare this overlay piece. Once we have that done, we're going to flip this over to the wrong side, and on the 2 short sides, we're going to measure in 1 inch and draw a line. Next, we're going to take some double-sided tape, put it along the short edges, and we're going to fold these edges into that line, and that is making it so we're folding this raw edge in by 1/4 of an inch. Next, we're going to take this to the machine, and we are going to top stitch this with a scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Next, you're going to take this piece right side up and the gusset piece right side up, match up those long side centers of both, clip them in place, flip this over, and trim off the excess that is hanging over our gusset piece of that overlay, and then secure with clips. What we're going to do is we are going to take this to the machine, and we are going to baste the long sides and then top stitch the short sides with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So this will give us 2 beautiful lines of top stitching along those short edges. Once that is done, we're going to go ahead and install the purse feet into those marks that we made as per manufacturer's instructions. If you need a class on how to do that, down below in the description. So purse feet are on. I also like to put a piece of duct tape on the wrong side or on the prongs of the purse feet for extra stability. Okay, so now we are going to work on our crossbody connector pieces. So you're going to draw a halfway 1-inch line in between the two, and we're going to fold the two longer edges into that center line, creating a 1-inch connector. Once we have those edges folded in, we're going to go ahead and top stitch each folded side with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance like I've done here. I'm going to use little pieces of some double-sided tape on one of the short edges on the wrong side. I'm take my D-ring, slide the flat side onto the wrong side, and fold this wrong sides together, holding that D-ring in place. Now on the top gusset pieces here, I'm going to find my top and bottom centers with small snips. And then on my D-ring, I'm going to draw up about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And we are going to line this up nice and centered with the bottom of that top accent or top piece like so, and clip it in place. And then we're going to take this, the gusset accent piece, put it right sides together, line it up into those clips like so. And then we're going to go sew across here. Once we have sewn that seam, well, first I'm going to do my other one here. And then we're going to push that black piece, that accent piece, down towards where the bottom of the bag will be to make sure your seam allowances are pointing away from that top panel piece, and top stitch through that with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then go back in with a 1/4 of an inch top stitch seam allowance for some nice decorative stitching. Do that for both pieces. Take that piece and we are going to put it right sides together with the top of our gusset piece, like so. Clip it in place. Do the same with the opposite side. Then we're going to sew across there with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we'll be pushing our seam up towards that accent piece and doing our top stitch with an 1/8 of an inch and a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance again. This is what our gusset piece looks all finished, and go ahead and set that aside for now. Okay, so now we're going to take that gusset piece and our two main panel pieces, and we are going to back them with foam. So I'm going to show you a handy trick to make it so the foam is not as thick. So you're going to use your piece like this. You're going to cut your foam about 1/4 of an inch or so larger than the piece, like I have done here. Now in the top corners of all these pieces, we're going to cut about a 1-inch square away from the foam. And this is going to make it so our seams do not get too bulky when we go to top stitch and sew this together. You're also going to do that on the other main panel piece, as well as the tops of our gusset pieces. So where that top gusset piece is on both sides. cut that foam away without cutting the main pieces. Once you have all that done, you're going to go ahead and you're going to baste all the way around those panels with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's what this looks like. Now this is the fun trick why we cut our foam a little extra wide. So you'll see you'll have quite a bit to be able to grab on, so you can pull it nice and tight along that base that we just did. And you can put your scissors at about a 45-degree angle like I'm doing here and cut that foam away on that angle. And you are going to see that is going to make the foam nice and slim and not thick and bulky, which is fantastic, especially if you are on a domestic machine. This is an upholsterer's trick for minimizing the bulk in those seams. So you'll want to do that along all of these pieces. And I'm going to show you here the difference it makes. So look between the two, how much thinner the one on the left is compared to the one on the right. So I went ahead and I did it with my gusset piece, and I went in and put my rivets in these places here, backed with Decovil Heavy to give a little extra strength to my connectors. Now I decided I'm not going to do the magnetic snap on this one. I don't think I need it for what I'm going to do, but you can definitely follow along in the pattern. For our slip pocket piece, we're going to take our exterior and our lining pieces right sides together, and we're going to clip together along the top and the bottoms. We are not going to worry about the sides for now. Then we're going to go ahead and sew across the top and the bottom of this with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Once that is all done, you can go ahead and turn this tube right side out. Give it a really, really good press, making sure that top seam and that bottom seam are nice and even. I like to use clips to hold that seam nice and tight. And then what we're going to do is we are going to baste the two sides and top stitch along that top. We are not going to top stitch the bottom just yet, just that top. Now we're going to take our exterior front main panel. We're going to find our top and bottom centers by folding it in half and making our snips or our marks. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure that is definitely centered. We don't want a crooked pocket here. I'm going to put a little bit of double-sided tape just along the raw edges of the pocket to help hold it in place, because I can't use any pins here as I'm using vinyl. Now we're going to measure up about 2 1/4 or 2 3/8-ish of an inch from the bottom. I'm going to fold my pocket in half to try to place this as centered as I possibly can and open it up. And then we're going to double check our measurements that everything is centered and straight and make adjustments as we need to, as you see I will be doing here. Once you're happy with the placement, go ahead and remove the paper on the back of the double-sided tape to secure it in place. so we can go ahead and stitch this. So what we're going to do, again, I'm just double checking to make sure this is nice and centered and straight. We're going to go ahead and we are going to sew down the short side, top stitch along the bottom, and sew up the raw side of the opposite side. Do not sew along the top. That will close up your pocket. All right, so that is all done. And now what we're going to do is we are going to make our handle placement. So what I like to do is just take my markings on my pattern piece and kind of make little snips and then fold it up like so. Then I'm going to place my pattern piece on top and take my silver marking pen, and I'm just going to make the marks of my strap placement just on the top and the bottom like so. And then I'm going to take my ruler. Oh, first I'm going to flip my pattern piece over, do the same with the opposite side. And then I'm going to take my ruler and I am going to line up those marks and draw my lines. Now you're going to see it's going to overlap on that pocket. That is what we want, is that is going to enclose those raw edges of that slip pocket. So that's one side marked and done. Again, make sure you are using an erasable pen or chalk or what have you. Once you're all done doing the front panel, go ahead and repeat with the back panel in the exact same fashion. Okay, so now we're going to do our handles. Now these are done a little bit differently than how I usually do them, but kind of the same. So I have my center line drawn down my handles. I'm going to use some double-sided tape on each of the long sides, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fold those into that center line. Once that is done, go ahead and bring those folded edges together, and this will create a 3/4 of an inch strap. Now this is where we are going to do our top stitching a little different. We're going to go with these handles. We're going to go ahead and top stitch each of these edges with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So that is all done. Now what we want to do is from each of the short edges of these straps, we want to measure up 9 inches. Double check that it is definitely 9 inches. I can see I made a mistake on this one here, so gotta change that to 9 inches. And then what we're going to do is in between those marks in the center, we're going to top stitch with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just between those lines. Okay, so that's all done. We just have 4 lines of top stitching in the center for now. Now on the wrong side of our straps, we're going to go ahead and we are going to put some double-sided tape up to about 8 inches, or just before that 9-inch line that we did on the opposite side. And then we're going to take our pattern or our main panel piece here, and we are going to line this up in between those lines that we drew. You'll see the very bottom short edge will hang over a little bit. That's okay. Bring the other side around and put it in place too. Just like so. We're going to go up here, across that line and down with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So this is giving us those 2 lines of stitching matching up with that middle section where we had the 2 lines of stitching. So again, up here with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance until you get to that 9-inch line. Make sure your needle is down. Pivot across that line and back down the other side with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You'll do the same with the other 3 sides of the straps. Okay, so this is done. I also want to put a rivet just below that 9-inch line backed with scraps of Decovil Heavy. And at this point, I like to go ahead with a baby wipe and just wipe away all of my silver marks, just so I don't forget to do it later and send this off to a client and it has all of those marks. We do not need them anymore. So wipe all of those away. I find a baby wipe works perfect. Okay, so now it's time to, I also put my nameplate on. It's time to put our gusset and our exterior main pieces together. So we're going to put these right sides together, line up that center piece, and secure with a couple of clips. I'm going to bring up one side, match it up to the top of the main panel, and secure with a couple of clips. Do the same with the opposite side, bring it up to meet up. And then we're going to start evenly distributing that fabric in between those sections. Now you will see that the gusset will look like it does not want to fit around those curves. And I will show you how we will make the gusset, which is a straight piece, into a round piece right here. So once you can't clip it together anymore, you're going to go ahead and you are going to make small snips of about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch into the gusset piece, just the gusset piece. And this is going to help us spread that fabric around that curve. It makes it turn this straight piece into a curvy piece. Make sure you don't go past your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you'll see how those little snips help spread it around that corner. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to do the same with both sides. You'll see my handle piece sticking out here. You can go ahead and trim that away. And then repeat with the other side. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and sew all the way around here with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Done, feel all the way around seam. Make sure everything is caught. Make sure your threads aren't too stretched out. If they feel a little stretched out, we can definitely add a second line of stitching. What I like to do is about 1 inch away from the top, I like to do a little snip about 1 inch down into the seam allowance to spread these seams out. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to baste those little areas in place. And what this does is it just helps reduce that thickness later on when we go to top stitch this. Now I'm going to also go ahead and for the rest of that seam, I'm going to go and add an extra line of stitching and then add my back panel in the exact same fashion. Once you're all done sewing on that back panel, go ahead and turn this right side out. Make sure you push out all of those
seams, double check everything was caught, that your threads do not look stretched out. With that second line of stitching within the seam allowance by 1/8 of an inch, that should definitely help. You don't always need to do that, but I always check it because with certain vinyls, you may find that you need just that little extra strength in those seams. Take a look, she looks great. Now we can work on our zipper panels. So what I like to do is take my zipper by the yard and make my zipper tape about double what one of my zipper panels are, and I just cut that off. Okay, so now I'm going to measure in a 1/2 inch seam allowance on my zipper panels, use a little bit of tape on the end and fold this in, and what this is doing is folding in the short raw edges by 1/4 of an inch. You'll want to do this for all 4 of our zipper panels. Okay, make sure they're all nice and even. We're going to take 2 of them. On one, we're going to measure in on the top 1/4 of an inch in from the left, and on the other one, 1/4 of an inch in from the right. Now I'm going to take my zipper tape, and on the wrong side, I'm going to measure in, on the right side, I'm going to put in a 1 inch line, and that's going to help us put our zipper pull on straight later. And now we want to make our zipper stops here. So on the opposite side, you're going to fold it down like so, kind of at a, is that a 90-degree angle? I think so. Hold it with a pin, fold down the opposite side and pinch it the exact same way, as even as you can possibly get them. Secure it with the pin and then go baste these curves in place. Once that's done, you can go ahead and trim off that excess tail there, and we have nice curvy sides on the left side of our zipper tape. Go ahead and pull the zipper tape apart. Now on the one with the marking on the left, you want the curvy side of your zipper to the left. Both of these pieces are right side up, both the zipper and the zipper panel, and that is your lining zipper panel, just so you know. Now line the curvy mark of your zipper tape up with that 1/4 of an inch mark. Do the same with the opposite lining zipper panel piece, but you are going to have your curvy part of your zipper pull when right side up, curving to the right. Then we're going to take our exterior zipper panels, add some double-sided tape. Again, you can use clips here if you prefer. And we are going to put these right sides together on top of our lining and our zipper pieces, sandwiching that zipper tape, making sure our panels are nice and even with one another. If you need to adjust the folded edge a little bit to make them even, you can definitely go ahead and do that. Now we're going to go sew across here with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, making sure not to go past the zipper panel on your zipper tape there. You're just sewing through the parts covered by the zipper panel. This is what that looks like done. Now what we want to do is we want to push these away from the zipper tape teeth, wrong sides together. So because I'm using vinyl, I'm going to use some double-sided tape as my pressing agent. You can definitely press this if you have used cotton. So bring the zipper panels wrong sides together, nice and taut, away from your zipper teeth, like so. And these should match up pretty evenly. I'm going to use a couple clips just to hold the other sides together, just so they don't slip on me. And then we're going to baste along the bottom, top stitch the short sides across the long side, and finish basting around the bottom for both of our zipper panels. Okay, so that's them done. You can see they mirror one another. You want to make sure everything is nice and even. You're going to fold these panels in half, and on the raw edges, just snip or mark your centers. Then you want to make sure those centers are nice and even, because if the zipper panel doesn't go on even, our zipper will not match up. Okay, so now I've already gone ahead and I've done my lining pocket, leaving my bottom open of my zipper pocket, and put on my slip pockets. I have classes on how I do those down below in the description. Okay, so I'm going to take my zipper pocket, which is my back one, my lining piece. I have my zipper panel right side up with the zipper closing to the left, so the curvy side to the left. I'm going to clip it in place nice and centered, matching up that center mark. I'm going to take my top lining panel, mark my long side centers on top and bottom, put these right sides together so the long side is right sides together with the top of this panel, and add it into the clips. Now you'll see that there's little triangles on the other side. That is okay. We want that. Go ahead and go across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do the same with the slip pocket side, but your zipper curvy part will be going to the right on that piece. Once that is all sewn, we're going to press that top panel up where the seam is going towards the top panel, and then you're going to top stitch that seam in place through the top panel with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is what our two panels look like. When you put them right sides together, our zippers should line up, which mine do. That is definitely what we want. And now we're going to do our lining gusset pieces. You're going to take your lining gusset tops, find the top and bottom centers, very much like what we did with the exterior. We're going to match the bottom sides of those right sides together with our lining gusset piece. Secure with clips. Sew across there with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, fold it up and top stitch through that top piece with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure that the seam allowance is pointing towards the top of the gusset piece. Okay, so that's what they look like all done. Now we are going to put this together very similar to how we did the exterior. I'm going to just snip into the bottom center of my gusset piece here. And I'm going to take the piece that has my slip pocket, and I'm going to make a marking. I think this was about 8 or 9 inches along the bottom, and we are going to leave that open for turning. Clip the center in place, bring the sides up just like we did with the exterior. Now it's going to look like our accent pieces on the tops don't match up, but they will once we are all done. Because of how it's curvy and how we're going to be doing our seam allowance, it will be pretty close. So don't worry if it doesn't look like they aren't matching up. Make sure your zipper tail is out of the way. You don't want to accidentally sew through it. And once again, you will be doing little snips into your gusset pieces to help it around that curve, just like we did with the exterior. So our lining isn't too baggy. For about this far down, you're going to do 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and then branch out to a 1/2 inch. Backstitch at those little marks we did along the bottom and do the same up the other side. So again, we're going to start sewing with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance here until about a quarter or a third of the way down. Sorry, a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, yeah. And then we are going to branch out to about a 1/2 inch, a really, really generous 1/2 inch. And this will just make it so our lining is slightly smaller and doesn't sag into the bag. So this is the side we are leaving the opening for turning. So you will sew with a 1/2 inch along this bottom to that mark, backstitch a couple times, break your thread, jump over to the other side, start with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then when you get about 2/3 of the way up, you will branch back down into a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the top. And this will make it so the openings of our exterior and our lining pieces are the same circumference around, but inside the bag, the lining will be a little bit smaller than the exterior. So this better shows how my seam allowance gets bigger along the bottom. We have that opening and on the bottom, that's what we want. And we're going to do those little snips again to open up that seam allowance just along the top, just to help reduce that bulk when we go to trim this in later, or put this in later on. Okay, so I went ahead and I did my other side the exact same way, but we sewed all the way around without leaving an opening in the bottom. Go ahead and trim off any excess up to that opening. Do not trim at the opening. Do the same with the opposite side, which you can go all the way around because we do not have the opening in the bottom there. And now we're going to take our exterior. We have our lining. I want my zipper pocket at the back of my bag, so I'm going to put my exterior inside with my back right sides together with the back of my lining piece. Tuck those handles in. You don't want to accidentally sew those up. Go ahead and clip the back center and then the front center, matching up those marks with the lining and the exterior pieces. And then move over to the sides and match up our side gusset centers that we had snipped, as well as matching up our seams of the exterior and the sides. And then go ahead and evenly distribute the fabric in between all of those marks. Now we're going to go ahead and sew this. If I was on my flatbed doing this, I would definitely be sewing from the inside of the bag, turning my bag like so, but I'm going to take this to my cylinder arm and go along here. You can do the exact same thing if you have a free arm on your machine. Sew all the way around the opening with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and double check that everything was caught, and it was, and I'm going to take this back to the machine and do a second line to security stitching all the way around within the seam allowance with 1/8 of an inch into the seam allowance. Okay, now that's all done. Make sure everything looks good and turn it through the opening in the bottom of the lining. Once you have your lining all pushed in, you're going to fold down that seam. Make sure everything is nice and tight. I'm going to use some clips to hold everything nice and tight and in place, rolling that seam in between my fingers to prepare for top stitching. Now make sure those corners at the top of the gusset are all poked out. You may have to reach in through the bottom to use your finger to poke out those corners a little bit to get a nice and beautiful curve there. Apply clips all the way around, making sure your zipper tails are out of the way as well as your handles out of the way, and secure with clips all the way around to prepare that seam. Okay, so once that is all done and you like the way it looks, everything is poked out beautifully. Then we're going to take this to the machine. Now again, if I was on a flatbed, I would top stitch through the inside like so, but I'm on a cylinder arm, or if you're on a free arm, you can definitely go ahead and top stitch this way. Now I am doing my top stitch here because I'm using vinyl on both sides here. I'm using a generous 1/8 of an inch seam allowance or a scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Also make sure when you get to where your handles are that you're making sure your handles are out of the way. You do not want to sew through those. Okay, so this is what it looks like with the top stitching done. She looks great. Now what you're going to do is pull the lining with the opening of your zipper pocket out, reach in through that zipper pocket hole and pull out the entire lining of the bag. Find that matched center along the gusset and the main panel on the side that we left open in our lining and secure with clips. And then we're going to go sew this shut with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once that is done, stuff it back in through the pocket, make it nice and tight in the bag, make sure everything looks sealed, and then fold in the raw edges of your zipper pocket lining piece and secure with clips. And then we are going to top stitch this closed with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once that's done, stuff that zipper pocket into the bag, and now you're going to go put your zipper pull on. So how you're going to do that is you are going to line up those 1-inch lines on our zipper tails, put your pull on, and if that line matches up, it should go on nice and straight. So my pull went on straight. You can see I lined up that line. My pull is perfectly on there. I'm going to trim this tail down to about here and put on my metal zipper end. So my zipper end is on, my zipper looks great. I'm gonna double check that everything is functional. Zips up great, shape is wonderful. Pat yourself on the back, put on your crossbody strap. I'm sure your Yasmota handbag looks fantastic too. And we're done.
All right, that's it. That's all. What'd you think of that? It's actually a pretty fast sew. It's pretty easy to do. This would be really easy to modify as a drop-in lining if you want to do that. Yeah, if you have a hard time turning it, but this was pretty easy to turn. Yeah, I just loved making this. And we also have made this in our Tuesday classes of October 2023. So if you need a slowed down version of this, what you could do is definitely join the membership side and catch the replays on those classes. Anyways, if at any time you did like this video, please do give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. And again, check out the membership side. There may be something there that really piques your interest. Also, if you want to support my channel further, you can always buy me a coffee. That's linked down below in the description. Until the next one, I'll catch you guys later. Bye.